Okay. So, good morning, good everyone, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another Excel section brought to you by UrBizEdge. On today's topic, we'll be having with Power Query and Power Pivot. Our guest speaker for today is Linson Abah. So this session is brought to you by UrBizEdge. I'll just give a brief description about UrBizEdge. So UrBizEdge is a registered Microsoft Excel consultant, financial modeling, business intelligence, data analysis, and enterprise solution firm in Nigeria. We specialize in helping companies and high-value professionals be on top of their business data. So we're also the developer of some financial tools. So we're the developer of Nigerian Finance Market Analysis tool, which you can find it in Microsoft Office Store, and also lots of financial tools. As you all know, we're also a training company in Lagos, Nigeria. So this is our calendar for upcoming training. So on the 4th, which is tomorrow of July, we're having finance and financial statement for non-finance manager. Also on the 12th of July, we're having Python for data analysis. Also on the 15th of July, we're having big data analysis, Power Query, Power Pivot, and VBA. That's Visual Basic Application. So description about our special guest today. Okay, so it's a data analysis at Safe Border. Linson is a proactive data analyst with proven analytic and problem-solving skill. He's proficient in business and data analysis, project management, business documentation, implementing user acceptance testing, and providing technical support towards achieving your business goals. He's passionate about using his experience and data analytics for marketing and business analysis to build solutions and improve customer experience and productivity. So no further ado, I'll hand over the session to Linson. So Linson, over to you. So I'll stop sharing my screen now.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay. So, am I audible enough?
Yes, you're audible. Can you hear loud and clear?
Okay. Thank you. So I want to welcome everyone to this session. By the end of this session, my goal and expectation is that you would have gained something new or learned new ideas on how to improve your reporting or how you work with Power Query and Power Pivot in Excel. So that's my earnest expectation. So, okay, before I start, I just want to tell you a brief story, right? So, maybe I should turn on my camera as if you want to see my face. If you don't want to see my face, it's still fine.
Let's see your face.
So, okay, so this is my face for now. So, 2 months ago, I got a message on Slack that I should work on a certain report. So I got some messages. So I just started working on the report, and in 2 or 3 days, the report was live, and I published the report. I was really excited because I was able to finish it in a very short time, and yeah, I felt like we'll move on to something else. Then a day later, I got a message on Slack that all the results of my analysis are wrong. So I was like, okay, that's not possible because I validated all the results. So we went back to that again, and I realized that it's not just about the approach, but it's based on how I modeled the data and based on the question that they wanted to solve. So the company had a problem they wanted to solve. They didn't give the person that was in charge of the report didn't give a full scope of how they want the report to behave. So I just did the normal process, and when they check, the results will be wrong, right? Because I've already modeled the data based on the understanding of the business problem that I have. But now I'm being informed that the business problem has a little clauses here and there, and now I have to go back to modeling the data all over again. And to be very frank with you, to understand that it's just a single clause, but to understand how it works took me about a week because we had to do a lot of back and forth. And without understanding that clause in the business statement, there was no way I could build a model that would answer the business question. So it took a lot of back and forth, and after that, I had to start modifying the model. And to be very frank, I actually built the model from scratch because the first model I was working with was very slow. Um, because I had to start doing a bit of cut and join here and there. I delivered the results. They were able to use the report, but it wasn't fast. It was very slow. They couldn't do a lot of stuff. So by the time they already have the basic minimum, right? There's something we call minimum viable product. So we do that in analysis too, where people, maybe someone has requested for a form of analysis. So you know it's going to take a longer time to deliver a full product. So what you will do there is to come up with something simple, something they can use for now, something that solves a basic problem, right? So that's an idea from product development, which is called minimum viable product. So I just came up with something they can use. It's not very efficient. So it took me time to build a new data model from scratch. And by the time I deployed the new data model, the report was faster. They were excited about it. When they saw that, like, okay, wow, this is amazing. This is faster. Oh, we can see this now. We can see this here. So data modeling also has a way of shaping your capabilities, right? The things you can do as you build your report. So for today, I'll just talk about what data modeling is, why we will model our data, and how to create this should be an effective data model. So I believe if you're here, and for people who are not new to data analysis, they would have heard about a data model, right? Like, okay, I know what a data model is. And I know for some persons who are new into data analysis, this is something you likely come across most of the time, because as you create your reports, you may have the need from time to time to create a data model, especially if you are working with many tables, right? So I just copied this from Wikipedia. I didn't want to start writing a long definition, because this definition summarizes the basic things we'll be working with. A data model is an abstract model that organizes elements of data and standardizes how they relate to one another and to the properties of the real world. Let's say, for example, you're working with data about cats. So you have a table for cats, you have a table for cat activities, you have a table for cat owners, then you have another table for dates, right? So these are different tables. So you need an abstraction that gives you an idea of how these tables are related to each other. So in this instance, now the cat will be your entity, right? So you have a cat, then maybe you have the weight, the height of the cat. So this gives you details about the cat. So you can call them attributes, right? Then from there, you can start worrying about dates too. So dates, you have weeks, months. So by the time you create this relationship, you now have a model that gives you an idea of how this data is related to each other. So you can start with an abstract model, but the abstract model is telling you what is happening in real life because of the type of data you're working with, right? So down here, I added that in a data model, we want to organize entities. Remember, when you talk about entities, you can refer to entities as objects, right? Your entity in this place could be product. Your entities could be a human being, maybe people, staffs. So those are your entities. So each entity now has one or more attributes. So if your entity is a person has a name, a person has a height, a person has an address. So these terms form the part of your data. So here now we see that entities can be represented as tables. Then for the attributes of those entities, you find them in your data as field or columns. So each column now will just be an attribute. Each column would be an attribute. So what we have here is you have multiple tables. You have me, Linson, as a person. I'm a staff of a company. I have activities. I do a lot of stuff. So you realize that this data can't sit in isolation, right? You need a means for these tables to be able to speak to each other. Let's say you have table about sales. You have tables about products. You have a table about, let's say, your customers. With all these tables sitting in different locations, it will be irrelevant to your business. You need a way to link this table to each other so that they are able to speak to each other. As they speak to each other, it means that you can start answering complex business questions, right? And what helps is that for you to link them, you need to create a relationship between the tables. So if you have table for customers, you need to create a relationship between that table and the table for sales. For example, you want to know the name of the customer, you want to know the location with the highest sales. You create a relationship where you have a relationship between your customers and sales. Then what relationships also does is that it allows us to filter our data, right? So we can propagate filters from one table to another table. We can have a fact table and dimension table. I'll talk about fact and dimension table in detail later on. So we can now use the dimension table to summarize our data. It helps us to understand our data better. It helps describe our data, give us a summary view and idea of our data. So something again that is very important in data modeling again is the primary key, because the primary key helps you to identify each unique records. Then you can also use the primary key to do some testing to ensure that each table has a unique record. For example, for tables where duplicates are not expected, you have a primary key and you check. If you see duplicate, that means something is wrong. You wouldn't want that in your data. So it is in the process of creating a data model that you get to check all these things and enforce it. You enforce a form of rules that said, this table, I want unique records only. That way you take away duplicates, you take away null values. A primary key cannot be null, right? Because it's supposed to help you identify a unique record. So when you have nulls, it means that something is wrong. So during data modeling, that's where noticing data quality issues, because you want to resolve that problem. So by the time the end user starts using your report or the result of your analysis, you are confident that what they are looking at is accurate. So in some cases, for example, you have a customer table that contains the customer information and the primary key. Then you now have the customer information in a sales table, right? So in the sales table, you don't want the information of all the customers in the sales table. That would just be the normalized table. You don't want that. You want to work with a normalized table. So what you will just find in the sales table will just be the customer ID. So there, the customer ID is not home. It's not home to that table, right? So we'll call it a foreign key because it is foreign to that table. That is not the home of that table. It only helps us identify records from a dimension table, for example, now which will be the customer. So these are the things I've mentioned. Just these few slides I've shown you, I've mentioned a few things, and these are the things I've mentioned. I've mentioned entities. So when these are things that make up your data model as you're creating your data model in Excel. So we talk about entity, and I think this is also applicable to Power BI if you're someone who is into Power BI. So you have entities. Entities will be your tables, right? Because each table now will contain attributes, which gives you details about your entity. Then you have relationship. So you have relationship between entities. Then you have measures, which are just summary information about your entity. So you can just say total sales. For example, now your measures could be columns that you can summarize, right? That is when for columns you can summarize, that means you're using implicit measures, but there are instances where you have to sit down and write your formulas. In instances like that, you'll be using explicit measures. So they are part of your data models. Then something that is also part of your data model is dimensions, right? Dimensions table, they help describe your data, they help you to summarize your data, and it also helps you to keep your data model normalized, right? So you can have normalized tables, so your tables will not be denormalized. You will not have a very large flat table, and this will cause you problems, and it will also blow up the size of your data model. Then we have the fact table. For fact table here now, you'll be talking about transaction data, right? Talking about transactional data activities. Okay, someone buying a product, someone ordering a product, you can have your orders table, daily activities that happens in your company. So these are all things that are going on. You can now use this in conjunction with the dimension table and you'll be fine. But before I go on, I want to confirm that you can actually hear me and we are together.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Am I moving too fast?
No, no, I don't know. You're perfect. You're perfect so far.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
So, why do we model our data? So yeah, you can just pick up anything, just do anyhow, write some formulas here and there, and yeah, you're fine. You see, you don't need to create a data model. So why we do that, first of all, is to enforce data integrity, right? So if you are in a very large organization, for example, you have a lot of analysts, maybe like three, four, five data analysts, then you many people can be working on different type of data sets on the same report actually for different department or as need may arise. You would want to ensure that your data is complete. If you're pulling the data for 2020, you want to make sure that yes, the data is complete. You want to make sure that the results of your analysis are accurate. You want to make sure that the data is also correct. Then you want to enforce consistency, right? So if someone should go to your you've created a data model. If anyone else besides you should connect to the data model, there should be a consistency. Each time we come back, the result should be the same. Each time I come back, okay, I want to see total sales for January. The result should be accurate. Let it not be that I'll come tomorrow and the result for total sales for January would have changed, right? You don't want that kind of issues. And you also experience issues like that if the data is poorly modeled. So you can model your data, but the data was modeled poorly. That is a problem. So you now realize that maybe there's no consistency, or maybe instead of you to use the sales date for your analysis, you're using the order date for your analysis, right? So as you enforce that integrity and in your data model, you now see that there is a sense of consistency. There are cases where you may create your data model in Excel. You may not be the one to create the report. You may just create the data model and just share the file with somebody, and the person can just okay and start testing out. Maybe you have a junior data analyst, for example, that's under you, or an intern. You create the model and the person can play around with it, or maybe you're pulling a model from a Power BI data set. So these are things that will be very important. If the model is not prepared properly, you're going to run into issues and your analysis will be wrong. Like the first instance I gave you, right? Like the story I told you, what I did was correct, but it wasn't solving a business problem, right? There was a clause there that I missed out, and the analysis was wrong, and I had to do a lot of changes. Then number two, talk about the performance of your report. To be very frank, there's a way you model your data and some kind of functions you use to create your measures that will have an impact on the performance of the model. What I did initially was to use, we have intersect, we have accept, all these are table functions, right? But the relationship between the many tables I have in that data model was, to be very frank, bad. The relationship was poorly designed. My data model was poorly designed. So if you are looking at the analysis and my analysis for a longer period of time, maybe for like a year or two, you'll not be able to see anything. It will take longer time to respond. So you realize that the performance of your report will be terrible. So people are supposed to just click on your report. People are supposed to just click on the report and be able to just see their report in an instance, right? So if your model is designed poorly, the performance of your report will be very poor. And that's not nice. People become impatient. I'm like, no, 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 that report takes 30 minutes to load. That report takes 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 40 seconds to respond. I don't want to use that. Then I think this also relates to the second to ensure better end user experience. So if your reports are if your data is poorly modeled, you run into the issues of poor performance. Then your analysis will likely be wrong, and people won't trust your analysis. So that's not a good user experience. Then with a properly designed model, you can also perform some form of advanced analysis or write some kind of complex formulas, right? But if your data is poorly designed, there's no way you can do some of these things, because your filters should be able to flow through multiple tables. Your filters should be able to help you aggregate data from multiple tables and present the final result. Then manage risks. Why I'm talking about risks here in this instance is you can just run into the risks of misleading everybody, because there are people who don't validate the result of analysis. I've noticed that. I've been in a situation where, let's say, I was multi-taxing and I was supposed to write some simple query, and I'll just write a query sent to somebody. I think I was working with I think either the marketing and growth team. So they needed the result for analysis. I send that report to them weekly, or sometimes they just want to know. I'll send it to them. So there was a week I missed a clause in my query and I just sent it to them. They just took the value as it is, right? They didn't tell me like, okay, oh, we've noticed that the value has changed. Nobody said anything. It was like a week later, and I want to give them a new result. And now I realize that something is wrong. The value for the previous week was already higher. I was the one who still told them that the value was wrong, right? So you have to be careful, because sometimes the people you're working with don't understand that they have to validate the results of your analysis sometimes, right? They have to look it up. If there's a change in the data, some people just, for example, if a company is expecting a growth, right? And when they just say that the value should just go up, they'll be very excited that, oh, the value is good. Oh, our measure is working. The process we've implemented is working fine. They'll be very excited about it. They may not go back to say, okay, can we confirm this? Can we check if this is right? So when things like that come up and you don't manage that kind of risks properly, you will run into issues like, oh no, you gave us a wrong result last week. We've made some decision. We spent some money based on that analysis. So you want to manage situations like that by creating a good data model. Then another reason why we model our data is because we want to spot and fix data quality issues, right? Sometimes the database you'll be pulling your data from, maybe the data, it was poorly designed, or maybe there's some business rules that were not taken care of. You have issues that you have to take care of, maybe clean the data, transform it. That you do that in Power Query, right? Before you pull the data into your data model. So sometimes you come to the data model, notice something is not working fine. The column is supposed to have unique values, but they are duplicates. You have to go back to Power Query again, fix some things. Maybe a value is not properly named. So as you're modeling your data, that's where you get to see issues like that. So one more time, I want to confirm if we're still together.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So
Yeah.
let's go to the next stage. So how to build an effective data model. So for example, something that will help you a lot is domain knowledge, right? You're in the company, you've been working with a company. It's very important that you understand what's happening, to understand business processes, to understand the type of data, all the company operations. Is very important you understand it, because this is going to help you in how you build your data model. If you don't understand this, there's no way for you to move very fast. So, for example, we just did a review, right? We just did a review in my company where I work. We have like mid-year review and all that, and the some of the senior are like, oh, Linson, when you joined the company, you were able to grab the ideas very fast. And the reason for that is that I needed to put my head down, right? Understand what is happening here. How is this business process working? And the good thing about it is that when you do that and you start looking at the data, you understand the data better because you have an idea. So if you don't understand, there's no domain knowledge, there's no business knowledge, and you just go straight into the data, you're going to be lost because you don't understand why some values are there. You don't understand the flow of the data. You don't know if the data you're working with is the original data or a table that has been transformed and cleaned. So that's going to help you. Then there's business use case, right? The business problem you're trying to solve. So sometimes there are business problems that come with some clauses. So the domain knowledge will help you to understand where the data is, which table you need to use. Then the business use case will also shape how you model the data. For example, the example I gave earlier, I needed to create new tables. I created 3 different tables. They are dimension tables to answer the problem. We already had a fact table and one dimension table that I was working with, but because of the business use case, I had to create 3 different tables, and at the time I had to go back, create some tables, and I wanted my refresh to be very fast. So instead of just putting the query in a Power Query editor, I just created a new table because the table was very big and I needed it for the analysis. So I created 3 different dimension tables, came back to Power Query, pulled my data and started working with it. You understand? So the business problem you're working with may be something that will shape how you build your data model, right? Then another thing again is you should build your model around facts, dimensions, and measures. You should always do this. I think this is the recommend. Sometimes people like using flat files to drag and drop here. You realize that you have performance issues. You will have issues with wrong results because sometimes you're working with a flat table. You don't understand your dimensions. You don't understand some of the cases that are there, some nuances in your data that you may not account for. But when you start breaking this down into parts and creating your dimensions, creating your measures, put your facts table in the middle, using a star schema, right? For example, because most times if I work with Excel, I try as much as I can, either Excel or Power BI, I try as much as I can to use a star schema because it's easier to work with. Then if you're building your data model, please, as much as you can, keep it simple. You don't need to build a very complex model. Do something simple, something that a person can look at and understand. So while I was speaking just now, I mentioned a star schema. So I would just like to point it out, right? I want to point out what I was referring to. So for example, now this is our fact table. So we look at this carefully. We have a sales table here, right? A table that contains sales. We have a territory table. We have a product table. We have a date table and a reseller, and we have this employee. So if you look at this carefully, here what you will just see here is that these are orders. This table contains orders. So these are orders that customers are placing. Okay, I want to buy this, I want to buy that. You realize that these are activities, actions that customers are taking. You get that now. So you get that for each customer, you can have multiple information for each, maybe for each customer in this table, multiple orders for each employee, multiple orders for each territory. You have people can order this product multiple times here. Then dates, right? You can have many transactions today, like 500 transactions. Then you have reseller here. You have your resellers, multiple transactions for each reseller. So you realize that this central table is containing all the activities that are going on. But then for each date now, we may want to get the month, we may want to get the year, we may want to get the quarter of the year, right? Then for each reseller, we may want to know the reseller's name for each region. So you realize that these tables here, they help us understand our data better. For example, we have employee key here. So if you want more information about that employee, you can find it in this table. There's no need for us to be repeating the employee name, employee age, employee date of birth. You don't need all of that information in your fact table. Everything can sit quietly in the dimension table, and you can now use that now to start summarizing, right? To summarize the data you have in the fact table to help you understand the data in the fact table better. So this is just something simple. Sometimes you may not necessarily have all these dimensions complete. No, sometimes in your own case, you may just have only 2-dimension tables. In the example I gave, I had just 3-dimension table, right? To have 3 dimensions table, then maybe you just have your date here. So just make sure that you have your fact table. Let the fact table be the heart of your analysis. Let it sit at the center as you build your data model, because it helps that you understand that you have just like a one-to-many relationship. Of course, this is also like a basic model. Your model may be more advanced and you have other tables that are related to this table. You have another dimension table here, right? That's related to this table based on your need or based on your business use case. You get that? So I want to make sure that we're together. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. So now that I've done some basic analysis, I'm going to go into Excel. Okay. So I just want to, most of the things I've mentioned here is just to build a foundation. So I'm going to go into Excel now and start working on some simple example. And I hope that you follow along and learn a few tricks here and there. Okay. Yeah. So I'm in Excel. So this is my Excel. So let's talk about a use case like this, for example. So you are a data analyst in a company, or maybe a business intelligence analyst, and you have issues where people come to ask for certain kind of analysis and they want it in Excel, right? No, we don't. They don't want Power BI. They don't want anything. They just want it in Excel, and they ask for it maybe like every day, every Monday, every Tuesday. So, but there's an issue. You don't want them to have access to the data. You just want them to just open it and look at the results. So, in some cases, you may want to have multiple sheets. You have the data in one sheet, and when you're done, you just hide the data, right? You hide that sheet. Maybe you protect that sheet. You do something to keep them from seeing that. That's not very effective. So, what I recommend doing most of the time is you use Power Query to pull your data into a data model. You use Power Pivot to create your measures. You create your measures and you come here, you use maybe a pivot table, a pivot chart to present the simple analysis that they want to see. And the good thing about that is that they can always just come and hit on refresh. If they hit on refresh, the report will be updated and they are fine. They are at peace and you're at peace, right? You can manage your data model, you can do whatever you want to do. You can do some kind of advanced analysis. So I'll start from the very beginning where we pull our data into a data model, right? And I'll show you some basic stuff. So to do this, let's say we come here and this is the data. I think this is a very common data set. I believe you should have seen it one way or the other by now. So this is a superstore data set, and you have information about sales, right? So you get to see that we have sales, the order ID, the ship mode. So you start seeing information about the customer name. This is a normalized table, like I mentioned earlier. So we're going to normalize this table, make it better, create a simple data model. We have shorter time, so I'll try to run through this as quickly as possible. So we are going to break this into product. We want to take away product away from this table as a dimension table. We want to take our customers away. So we have product here, we have our customers, and yeah, we have our orders. We're going to split this into 3 different tables. So I'm closing this now and coming here. So what you do by default is, if you're in Excel, you come to Excel by default, you'll be in home, right? So you want to go to data. If you go to data, you have the options to show queries if you have existing ones, but now we want to get data from an Excel file, right? So you go to Excel, you have other sources, but we're not using other sources here. So you go to here, you click on from Excel. So this is going to bring up an interface where you have the option to pick the data. For example, in my own case, the data is on my desktop. So I believe it should be this. You import it. So Excel is going to do the magic for you in the background, understand how many sheets do you have in your data, do you have tables in your data, it's going to get that. So we want to select multiple, we're getting the orders, we're getting people, we're getting returns. And for each of these tables, you can actually preview it here, right? So what we want to do, so what we are doing right now is extraction, right? We've been able to extract the data from an Excel file. So the next step will be is transform. After transforming the data, we load it. So that gives us the abbreviation for ETL, right? So this is just a simple ETL process. You extract data from a source, you transform the data. That's what we are doing now. So after transforming the data, what we do next is what? We load the data. So this is the interface for Power Query. So if you are seeing Power Query for the first time, this is what it looks like. It has home, where you have some basic features, and next it has transform. You use transform to change these columns, right? To change them, maybe you want to improve on the value, you want to change text, you do that. Add column, you use add column to add new columns. So basically you have home where you do some basic transformations here and there. You have transform where you transfer the current column. Then you have add column where you use that to add new columns to your data. Then here, this is just about the view And so now we're not talking about the navigation aspect of this. So look at this carefully. You have returns. These are products that were returned. If you look at this carefully, you realize that we have the column name down here, right? You have the column name down here. You want to fix that. What do? In Power Query, there's a use first row as header. You click this, and now you see that the first row is now the header. This is great. We don't have much to do here. You come here. So we have person. These are our sales reps. The sales reps for each region. So you see, we want to do this. So what we do also is what? Is to use the first row as header. We click on it, and that becomes the header. So we have person, we have region. And now, this is a denormalized table. So we want to normalize this table. We want to create dimensions from this table, right? So what we can do is, you can duplicate this table. You right click and click on duplicate. So by the time you duplicate this, you want to choose the columns that you want to keep. So for us to choose the columns we want to keep, we just go to choose column and click on choose column. Now we have the list of all columns. What we want to do here is to just create a dimension table for products. So you select all, then you come here. We have a product ID, product category, product subcategory, and product name. So this gives us all the information we need about the product. So we click on OK. Together we have product ID, category, subcategory, and product name. Now, when I was explaining some of this concept, I mentioned earlier that in this instance, the primary key here is what? The product ID. It helps us identify each record in this table. But if you sort this, you realize that we have duplicates, right? Because look at this, for example, we have this multiple times because this is coming from a fact table. So we want to ensure that each product ID is unique. So we'll take this step out. It's irrelevant. So we'll go back, and what do? We remove duplicate. So by the time we remove duplicate, this ensures that each product here is unique. And this helps us to identify each product in the active and the others table. If I should sort this now, you realize that there are no duplicates again. This value was duplicated like 3 or 4 times before, but now we just have a single record. So I'm taking away this step. We are renaming this. Remember, we have this is a dimension, right? So I want to indicate clearly that this is a dimension table. So products. This tells us that we have our product here. If you want to get more information about the product, you do this. Then there's something else again. We have information about the customer name and customer segment. You get a country, all stuff like that. We want to take that out of this. So what we do here is we duplicate this one more time, and we also choose the columns we want to keep. So right here, we want the customer name, segment, country. This gives us all the information we need about the customer. We take out all the columns we don't need. And here we also want, for example, this customer ordered 2 products. So you have, for example, this customer's name is showing up multiple times. We just repeat the same steps where we remove duplicate. So by the time we remove duplicate, we now have unique record for each customer. So this is the dimension table. So we'll call this customer. Now we know our customers. We can easily know the total number of customers we have, and we can use this to summarize. So we have to go back to this table now and remove all the irrelevant information that is present in this table. We'll take it out and make this to normalize this table. So what we have to do is go back here. For example, you see that what is this called? Let me see. We have the row ID, the order ID, great. Order date, ship mode. That's great. Then you see this. We need a customer ID here because the customer ID will help us identify the customer that bought the product. But we don't need all this information about the customer. We've taken that out. Then we also need the product ID because the product ID will help us know the customer that bought the product. Will help us know the product that the customer is buying, right? Then we have sales, we have quantity, we have discount, and then there's profit. Now we can just click on this, and now we have fewer columns. So you see that we just have relevant information. If the information is not relevant, we don't need it here. So this is a fact table. So I'm going to call this fact orders. People is also a dimension table, right? Returns is a dimension table. I'm not focusing heavily on that, so I will not. Okay, let me just add dimension to this. I'll leave returns as it is for now. We'll come back to that later, as if we have time. Good. So we have the row ID, we have the order. Now we have the order date, the ship date, the ship mode. You have the customer ID, product ID, and it's basic information. So if you want information about the cost of about the product, you find it here. If you want information about the customer, we find it here. So you don't have to repeat that information many times. It's irrelevant. It's going to blow up the size of your data model. And we have quantity, then we have profit. Yep. So that's for this. Please, can you confirm that you're still with me, please?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. So now this is the next step. Now, remember we were talking about how you extracted the data. What we just did now is simple data transformation. There are other complex data transformation you can do. For example, you can merge multiple queries together, right? You can come here and create conditional, maybe transpose your data. You can unpivot your data. You can come here, add conditional columns. But for some reason, we don't need most of that right now because there's no requirement for it. So what you would do now is we want to go to the next stage of the ETL, right? Which is to do what? Load. Remember I said extract, transform, load. You extract your data from a source, you transform the data, which is what we just did. Then the next step is to load. Then there's one more table you can actually create, right? The table you can actually create next is just the, what's it called? Let me see if I can rush it. Just give it 2 columns and we are almost out of time. You just want to create like a date table, right? Let me see. Where are you? Show, file, online sources, other sources, blank query. Yeah. So for a blank query, for example, you just want to rush it. For example, you can use the order date, right? So normally if I should do this, fact orders, fact orders is going to return the orders table here, but that's not what I want. I want the order date, right? So I'll do order date, and yep. So if you do this, it's going to give you the order date as a list. So for your table, you want the date to start from the list date, right? Maybe the minimum date. So what you can do here is just go to list. I think this is a lot easier in Power BI because you get a little bit of maybe IntelliSense there, here and there. Then you do minimum. If I'm correct, this should work fine. This gives you this is the minimum date you have here. Then you want to do date, the date time, not so sure. That's end of year. So this, no, not end of year, start of year, because you want to start your date from the beginning of the year. End of year. So we are going to run into a little mistake here since I'm not too confident about this. Yep. Let me see. Should I face? End of year, let me see. Is it date time? Okay, and let me see. Or is it date? Yeah, this is it. So this gives us the start of the year, right? So you just do start, what's the time? Okay. And also start date. Especially if your report requires people to work with date filters, you can just do start date, and yep, you have this. Then you can just duplicate this and call it end date. When you call it end date, remember what you want to do now is that you don't want the minimum date again, you want the maximum date. But remember, this is the order date. So, and in this table has both a order date and ship date. So you would want the ship date. That's where you'll be getting your maximum from, because sometimes that's where maybe order today, maybe like 3, 4, 5 days. That's when they're going to ship your product. That's what I suspect most of the time. So we can work with this. If we spot the issues, we'll come back to it later. So you can do end of year. Remember, now you want the end of the year. So now we have end of year. Now you can easily create your date table. Just come here and you'll be creating a list. This is how you create a list in Power Query. You use curly braces. Then you do let's see. Remember we have number from. So you have number from. You remember you have start date. I recommend you check your spellings, because since you don't get IntelliSense here in Excel, you likely, so you're saying start number from the start date and continue up to the third date. That's the meaning of the dot. You're saying continue, give me a list of numbers starting from the start date and continue it up to the end date. So this gives you the end date, and you click this. This is what it's going to do. It's going to give you a list. So if you've worked with Excel, you see sometimes Excel present dates like this. So you just want to solve that problem, just change this to a table, rename this to a date. To solve this, just you can change this to a date here, or you can click here to change this to a date. Now you have the date from the start of the year to the end of the year. We have our date here. What you can do next is to add new columns, right? So if you want to add new columns, where do you go? You go to add columns. You can add like the year. You can have your year. You can add information like the start of month, for example. You can add another one like let me see, quarter. Yeah, let me see. I think this should do. So we have year, then yeah, I think this should do. Okay, let's say start of quarter, the start of each quarter. Great. So that's it. You have your date. So this is also a dimension table, right? So this is dim date. So we tell you that this is a dimension table. So see, we've been able to create a simple date table from our data. We didn't have a date table before, but now we have a date table. You get that? So the reason it's important for you to have date table is, for example, when you have multiple dates in your data like this, you don't want to start pushing all the dates into your report, and again you want to modify which date should the analysis use, because there are instances where you want to use this date and the instances where you want to use this date. How do you control that? How do you create that kind of relationship? Without a date table, you won't be able to do that. This is why we need dimension table, right? So what you do next is to load your data into a data model. Remember, you are not loading it into Excel. You don't want to give the users the data. You just want to create a connection only, which is step 1. Then step 2, you do what? You add this data to the data model. When you load this and your query is going to run, you're going to get summary information for the number of rows for each of these. And by the time I think this just takes some few seconds and you're good. But if your data set is large, it may take longer time. What you just have to do is wait for the data to load. And I also recommend you add fewer steps to your Power Query, because the more steps you add, the longer it's going to take for your data to load. So now the data is loaded into the data model. We don't have it. You can't see it here, right? So for you to do that, you can just go to manage your data model, right? And for this to work, you need to have Power Pivot enabled, right? So if it's not enabled, you won't be able to access this. So you can just do a little Google search on how to enable Power Pivot. I would have shown you that, but we're out of time. So let me rush back here. So we're in Power Pivot now. This is what you notice. We have the fact tables. We have the tables here at just look at the mouse. Yeah, look at the mouse here. So we have fact tables. We have the people. You can add new columns if you want to add calculated columns. We have returns. These are product table, customer, let's say start date. I just use this for, don't necessarily need this. And this is your date table. You see we have that here. you can see our date table right here, right? It has the formatting. You can change the formatting of this table. You can change the formatting. Say, okay, I just want this to show date. I want this to show date only. Date, and I want this to show as date only. You don't want the time, right? You just want just the date. That's for that. Then when you come to come here, you can also get more data. Bring the data into your data model. You can refresh your data model. But the exciting part about this is this: you go to the diagram view. So by the time we come into the diagram view, let me zoom. So we have our fact orders. Remember what I was talking about earlier about you creating your data model. One table is missing, the customer table. We have returns. We have one more table is missing, the date table. Right. Yeah. Bring it closer. So we can push this down a bit, bring this down here, bring this here and here. So we can start modeling our data from this point, right? Let me zoom out a bit. Great. So we can start modeling our data from this point. And I spoke to you about primary keys, foreign keys, and all that. So for example, let me take this. This is supposed to be here. And let me show you how that works. So this is this now. For in the facts table where we have all the orders, you can do customer ID, right? So that means we can create a relationship between this table and the customer table. So all you have to do is to create a relationship. And you now have a one, this is a one-to-many kind of relationship. And it also shows you the direction of the relationship, right? Telling you that if you select a customer here, select a segment, select a state, the filter is going to flow through from this table into this table. Then we have the product ID. You also create the relationship between the product table and the fact table. You also see that this is also a one-to-many kind of relationship. Then we have region. Remember, for the people, we have this and we have region here. Remember, we don't have region in this table. We have it in the customer table. Then you get to see this, and you get to see the salesperson that is responsible for each region. And one more thing, you also get to see the order ID, right? So these are for products that were returned, right? So this is just like dim dimension. We can, I believe, just add dim. Yeah, you can rename what's created in the query. Good. That means if you want to change this, you have to go back to Power Query. Then finally, we have the order dates, right? So whenever you're creating relationships, look at this carefully. This is the day the product was ordered. This is the first relationship. But then we also want to use the date the product was shipped. You get that? Now we have two relationships between this table. Watch carefully. Let me zoom in a bit. If you watch carefully, you realize that one of the relationship is using a dotted line, while the one has a thick continuous line, right? So what you see here is that the one with the dotted line, let's go to edit relationship. Look at it, the one with the dotted line is the relationship between this and this. That is the relationship that is active. Sorry, the one with the thick line is active. The one with the dotted line is inactive. That means that if by default, you just create a measure, it is going to be using, as you are filtering by date, it's going to be using the order date. If you want it to use the ship date, you have to write a DAX formula using a formula called use relationship. What's a function you call use relation. So this is the name of the function you would use, right? So you will now specify the date. So in our own case, we have dim date. And now specify the second one. Remember, the second date we want to use here will become the ship date, right? So you now come here, you do fact orders, then you specify the name of the column. This dim date has a date column. So you specify date, and this right here has a ship date column. So you specify ship date. This allows you to make sure that you can now easily show total orders and total shipped orders. You can do that now. But without doing this, you cannot do that. You have to put multiple filters on your report, multiple filters for date. And when you do that, it's not even going to work because the relationship is not active. You get that? So you can close this. So when you use stuff like that, for people who are for some of you who are familiar with DAX, so you do calculate, calculate. In this instance, now you want to calculate maybe your total orders, right? So you do count rows, you do your fact orders table and stuff like that. You get that. Count rows, facts, orders. This helps us to, I can start writing that directly there, but I want to just show you the idea. So you count this, it gives you the total number of rows and stuff like that. Yeah, this, then you do this, format it so the DAX looks clean and all that. Please, can you confirm you're with me? So let maybe I'm talking to myself.
With you. Interesting.
Okay, yeah. So I'm not sure if you understand what I'm doing, you understand what I'm saying, because that's why I took the time to explain the basic concepts, right? So I took my time to show you what a star schema looks like. So you get the idea. Now, when you see this, you see that it's related to what we were discussing earlier, right? And I pointed how sometimes you can still extend this forward. So that's great. So you can go back to, we're in the diagram view now. This is why we're talking that it's an abstract model, right? It just gives you an idea of how all the multiple entities you have in your data models are related and how they speak to each other. So you can go back to data view. Now, this is the data view where you see this, you see all your tables. So now we've been able to create relationships. So the next thing you want to do is just to create some measures. So to make the measures that can help you to perform some simple analysis. For example, so to create a measure, you can come here, right? We can come here and say, so we can come here and say, what do we call it? The total. So we have sales. We can do total sales. Total sales equal to, what do we want to do? We want to sum. You get, so the good thing here, I think this is the edge you get now in, what's it called? The edge you get in Power Pivot, because you have a bit of intelligence here, unlike Power Query in Excel. So you do sum. What do you want to sum? You want to sum fact orders. What you want to sum here is the sale. It gives you total sale. That's great. You can just hit enter, and some things will just work in the background, and your formula will be ready. So you have total sales. What I just did now is called a measure, right? We've been able to create a measure. You can create measures elsewhere. I will show you that later. So we have total sales. Then maybe we want to do total quantity, right? We do total quantity. Okay, I'm almost out of time. Let me round up. Total quantity. Then you just do sum. Sum and you do quantity. From the facts table, fact orders, where's quantity? Yeah, quantity is here. You click on enter. So some stuff will run in the background, your result will be ready. But remember now, we have total quantity, but we want to see the total number of products that have been shipped, right? So what you can do is come here again, do total shipped. Let me see. So you can do calculate. See, result, calculate, sorry. You can do calculate. So you're doing calculate. Now remember, the two measures we have created earlier is available to us, right? We have the total quantity and we have the total sales. So we want to focus on the quantity, but now we want to modify the filter context, right? Let me see, can I expand this? Good. So we want to modify the filter context, how this should behave. So I'll just do this and come here. So the filter context we want to modify now is to use that function I called earlier, called what? Use relationship. I've already explained this area. So we want to use the ship date. Sorry? Was someone saying something?
You can carry on. No.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
yes.
Okay. So just dim. So now we can specify the date, right? We can specify the date, and now we can now specify that we want to use the relationship, the one that is inactive, right? Which is the relationship coming from the orders, ship date rather, ship date. We do this, and we can now close the relationship. So we now have a simple formula, and what we've been. That's why sometimes you need to create inactive relationships, because those inactive relationships you will use them later on to create measures that will help your analysis. Just click on enter. Yeah. So since we're out of time, I will not create new measures again. I'll just go over to what's it called? To just create new tables, right? Just go to Power Pivot, and yeah, and close this. So you close this. So you can now go to, this is normal stuff you do in Excel, right? You're at home, you want to insert something. What do you want to insert? You want to insert a power pivot. Remember here we don't have tables. We don't want to get that. We now have a data model. So we can let me start from here. So we can insert this, from a data model. Existing sheet, great. Click OK. Now we can look at all the tables we have created. These are the tables we imported. And if you go to the fact orders, let me adjust this. Let's go. Where are you? Fact orders. You now see that we have what's it called? Look at the measures we created. You see FX. So these are formulas that we have total sales and all that. So for example, we can do what do you call it? Let's do something. Let's go to customer. So we have a segment. So you get all the customer segments. For example, that's much. I'm looking for something short, something you can see on the screen at once. Region, yeah. So we have region, and so we put that in our rows. Customer segments go to the columns, right? So we have rows, we have columns. We can now just go back and do total sales. We have total sales. Then let's say, for example, we want to do, instead of total sales, we want to do total quantity ordered and total quantity shipped. You see this now? So we have total quantity orders and we have total quantity shipped. You may not see the differences now, but what we want to do next is to insert, let's call it a slicer, or insert a timeline. Let's use not all of this. We want to use the date. Great. So you come here and you select June, July. Now I want you to monitor this carefully, and I think this is where the emphasis is. So because a lot of people do that mistake, you think by adding multiple filters on your reports, you are going to, so users can choose any filter they want to use. You add like 9 date filters. When I started using Power BI, I had instances where my managers insist, no, I want to see the filter for date registered, date activated. I said, no, we need just one date filter on our report. If the report is modeled properly with one date filter, all those changes you see in the background will apply here. For example, now for East, this is the total number of product that was ordered. This is what was shipped so far within that period. You see 59, 53. So this helps you to see the difference, that because we modeled our data properly, we won't run into issues, right? You get that? So you can clear this, take it out. Then there's something else. Let me see this. I really wanted to show you this. So there's something else you can do if you've modeled your data properly, right? There's the option for quick explore. You can choose how you want to drill through. Do you want to drill through to the customer ID? Do you want to drill through to maybe sub-product? When you drill through, you see a drill through. Do you see this? There was no need for you to start creating multiple reports. So one of the things in my place of work, one of the things I advocate for a lot is self-serve analytics, right? I show people how to use stuffs like this. So I train them, but by the time I create a simple report and show you, that means you can come there and start modifying things. You can come there and start changing things. And like, okay, just explore, you can do other things. I think the idea behind explore here is like the drill through you have in Power BI. This is for people who are conversant with Power BI. So you can just create something simple here. And the moment we drill through, look up here, you see that a filter was applied telling you that we are seeing this for East. Because let me go back. Control C, Control Z. Yeah, you see that now. So when you wanted to explore here, what were you doing? I was on East and I clicked on explore and I went to product and I said I wanted to see sub product and I clicked on drill through. You see that it tells me that the data I'm seeing is for the region called East, right? So you don't have to create multiple reports. If you train people right and you create a good data model, it will be super easy for you to allow them to play around with whatever they want to play around with. I can now apply my filters for June, September. I can expand this for 3, 4, or 5 months, and it becomes easy. Now you can just choose a different region, and you still get the same result. Ideally, before you're creating Power Pivots, you have to start. You come here, you add your filters, do some stuff. So if you train your people well, you won't have to worry yourself. You create basic reports, then they will now take the initiative of their own to think of how they can use the report to look at product that we have returned, to look at other stuff like that. I know we are out of time, so I want to stop here for questions.
Awesome. Wow. Actually, wow, that's cool. That's cool. So, is there any question? If you have any question, so that was interesting. So, nice one. Linson.
Thank you.
Any questions so for anyone? Actually, what something I actually learned was there's a way I used to create my calendar tab using Power Query. So I'll try yours. I like the way you did yours. I'll try it.
Thank you.
So any questions so far? Any question? Because everyone has been saying awesome section, awesome. Everyone has been following along. So our usual last questions. Tell us how you start your old data journey, and also what advice is for people just starting out in the field. If it's not a question so far.
Okay. How do I put it? Okay, I think I usually have a slide. I used to keep it inside. So, how I started my data journey was a bit funny. So, I was serving at the time, right? So, I did my ND initially, so I know what it felt like. Because when I did my ND, it was very hard for me to get job. You have to walk around. You know how Lagos is. And at the time, I didn't know how to search for jobs online. So I ended up after my ND, you have to do like one IT for 1 year. I had no job. I ended up doing security. So I worked as a security man in a bank. Yeah, I think FCMB. I think all the bank group and Onikpan. Yeah, I was working as a security guard there. And when I was there, I knew that this is not me. So I was there. I worked for 3 months. I resigned after armed robbers were disturbing the area like mad. So I resigned and I did stuff here and there. So when I was serving, I panicked, like, okay, I don't want to go back to this. What do I do? What do I do? So I was just learning random things. I learned HTML, I learned CSS, and now got to JavaScript. JavaScript choked me like mad. Couldn't breathe well. So I was like, okay, wait, I need to find something else. So I did statistics. So I was searching which job can I do as a statistics. I saw data analysis. I'm like, okay, data science, and that's how I started, right? I read about it online, and then I got a scholarship. I took the scholarship. I took some courses, and I think 3 weeks after graduation, I got a data analyst job because I started learning data analysis. I started learning data analysis like 3 months to graduation from service. So what I learned that time was sufficient enough to get me my first job as a data analyst. You get? And since that time, I think I've worked in marketing and advertisement. I've worked in consulting, consulted for like people for like NCC, Stanbic IBTC, pension managers. From there, I went to health insurance, and from there I transitioned here. So the opportunities in tech, right? You can change jobs if you want, but if you have the opportunity, if you see that there's opportunity to grow in the company, I'll recommend you stay. So I have my own reasons for changing multiple jobs because we're in Nigeria, right? For me, I feel like it's the easiest way to grow your salary. So I have to change multiple jobs real quick so that with time I have to settle down and not change jobs again. Yeah, but if you get a really good paying job, you don't need to change jobs. You can just stay there and grow. So that's my story.
Oh wow. Awesome. So I've dropped license LinkedIn, so you guys can connect with him on LinkedIn. Okay, I like the way you did your journey also.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's step by step. Wow. I think we also had the same kind of roadmap. Mine too was I was doing robotics, all this embedded stuff. Like, okay, what can I do? What can I do? So data came in and it really helped. So
Yeah, yeah.
awesome. So we'll be having another section by 6 p.m. So I'll just drop the link. So you guys can join.
So I believe I can stop sharing my screen now, right?
Yeah, you can stop sharing your screen. Yeah.
Okay.
People have been saying thank you. Everybody has been giving you awesome comments. They've been saying thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I appreciate everyone.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll drop the link right about now. So you guys can join us. We'll be having another section. Okay, just a minute. Okay, someone hands is up. So is that's let me make a speaker. Alara, okay. Sarah, you can unmute yourself now. Alara, you can unmute
Okay.
yourself.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Linson. I'm highly grateful for you facilitating. Sincerely, I've learned a lot.
Thank
I
you.
just want to. I just need your advice because I'm a teacher for like 5 years now, and I don't really feel myself like that. So I try switch to data science. Though I just started a couple of months, like 2 months ago, but I've not yet going to it deeply. So I just know things I need to like dwell more on and how to go about it.
Okay. You said you just started. So if I have any advice to give you, the advice I have to give you is that there's no end to learning, right? There's no end. This data analytics field is very vast. So what I'll recommend is that you should start implementing what you've learned.
All right.
That anything you've learned, start implementing. Did you learn how to use Power Query? Can you automate something using Power Query? Do you learn how to use Power Pivot? Can you create a simple report? Can you build a data model? Can you document it? Write about it. Document it. Write about it. Yeah, a million people have written about it. Don't worry. Just write what you understand about what you've done. Do you learn how to use Power BI? Good. Build a simple Power BI report. So if you keep learning without doing, you will not grow very fast because it is in doing that you will notice your knowledge gap. You will notice things you don't know. Then be confident in yourself. What you do today, in 3 or 4 months' time, you can always do better. So why worry about if people will judge you? Do what you can do now. Just put it out there. People, and I think the community is nice. People will comment, tell you can improve on this, you can do on this. That's how you learn and grow really fast.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm grateful.
All right.
Oh, thank you very much. So we'll stop this section now. So our next section is by 6 p.m. We'll be having text analysis using Power Query. So we're having an MVP take course. That's Ayodeji for Larry. So I've dropped the link. So for some of you that might be interested, by 6 p.m. So 6 to 7. So bye everyone. Links and thanks again very much. Really appreciate it. Awesome section.
All right. Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.